Every age has its question. Ours, perhaps, is the same as it has always been. Why do we exist in a world that refuses to answer? We live surrounded by silence. The universe offers no reason, no response, only the endless hum of being. And yet we search. We build systems, faiths, philosophies, and dreams. We demand coherence from chaos, purpose from the indifferent. This tension between the human hunger for meaning and the world's refusal to give it is where the absurd is born. Albert Camus called it the confrontation between man's irrational desire for clarity and the unreasonable silence of the world. The absurd is not the world alone, nor the human alone, but the space between them. A wound that never heals, a truth that cannot be solved, only lived. Before Camus, there was Søren Kierkegaard, the Danish philosopher who lived through the dissonance of faith and reason. For him, the absurd was not the end of meaning, but its paradoxical gateway. In Fear and Trembling, he wrote about Abraham's faith, a man willing to sacrifice his son out of love for God. To reason, such faith is madness. And yet for Kierkegaard, this madness, this leap of faith, was the only way to reconcile the finite and the infinite. He called it the absurd leap, a passionate act beyond logic, where one believes despite impossibility. Faith becomes a defiance of reason, a surrender to the unknowable. Camus admired Kierkegaard's honesty, but rejected his conclusion. Where Kierkegaard chose faith, Camus would choose rebellion. When Albert Camus published The Myth of Sisyphus in 1942, Europe was drowning in despair. War, fascism, and the collapse of values made the question of meaning unavoidable. Camus begins with a sentence that strikes like a blade. There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. If life has no meaning, he asks, is it worth living? His answer is radical and luminous. To recognize the absurd and to live with it, not to escape it through faith, not to end it through death, but to stare it in the face and say, yes, the struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. The absurd for Camus is not a sentence. It is a beginning. It is the realization that freedom comes when illusions die. Once meaning collapses, we are free to create our own. He calls this triad revolt, freedom, passion. To revolt is to refuse resignation. To be free is to exist without the promise of eternity. And to live with passion is to love life precisely because it ends. Camus turns despair into defiance. He transforms meaninglessness into art. The ancient myth of Sisyphus becomes the mirror of the modern soul. Condemned to push a rock up a mountain only to watch it roll back down. Sisyphus embodies our own repetitive struggle for meaning. But Camus insists he is not to be pitied. His punishment is also his victory. Each descent is an act of consciousness. Each return to the stone is a choice. The gods have condemned him to failure, but they cannot take away his awareness. And awareness, for Camus, is the only real triumph. To live absurdly is to accept that the summit and the stone are one. To find joy not in the goal, but in the struggle itself. If philosophy names the absurd, art gives it form. In Camus' words, the artist forges meaning while knowing it to be meaningless. Art becomes rebellion, a revolt against silence. The writer, the painter, the actor, each becomes a Sisyphus in disguise. Camus saw in Kafka the perfect absurd artist, a man whose characters search endlessly for justice, truth, or salvation, only to encounter locked doors and unseen authorities. Yet Kafka never preaches despair. His works are illuminated by irony, tenderness, and lucidity. And beyond Kafka came a new language, the theater of the absurd. Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot, Eugene Ionesco's The Bald Soprano, Jean Genet's The Maids, all explore the emptiness of communication and the circular logic of existence. The absurd, once confined to philosophy, had become a stage. Laughter and silence now revealed the same void. But even before Camus or Beckett, the absurd had already found its echo in art, in a movement called Dada. Born in the chaos of the First World War, Dada was not a style but an act of protest, a scream against reason, logic, and civilization itself, because those very values had led to slaughter. At Cabaret Voltaire in Zurich, artists like Tristan Tzara, Hugo Ball, and Hans Arp turned absurdity into resistance. They made poems from random words pulled from a hat. They painted with chance and built sculptures out of discarded objects. Marcel Duchamp's fountain, a urinal signed Armut, became a declaration. Art no longer obeys meaning. It exists because it refuses. Dada was the birth of modern absurd art, art that mirrors the irrationality of its time. It said, as Camus would later echo, "If the world makes no sense, then neither shall we." Where Camus rebelled with clarity, Dada rebelled with chaos. Both sought honesty in the face of absurdity, one through thought, the other through provocation. Camus' answer to absurdity was neither despair nor cynicism, but revolt. He wrote in The Rebel, "I revolt, therefore I am." To revolt is to say no, and through that no to affirm life. The absurd man does not seek to explain the world. He chooses to live in it, fully, without illusion. He knows there is no ultimate meaning, yet he loves life all the more for that reason. This, for Camus, is the highest form of dignity. To live without appeal, to create in the void, to be free in the face of necessity. Today, the absurd is not confined to philosophy or art. It permeates our politics, our media, our daily rituals. We scroll endlessly, seeking connection in an ocean of noise. We build systems that promise control but deliver chaos. We chase meaning while fleeing silence. Camus would tell us, "The absurd has not vanished. It has only changed its mask." To live well today is to remain lucid, to resist both nihilism and blind faith, to act, create, and love as if meaning were ours to invent. Because it is. At the heart of Camus' philosophy lies an unexpected tenderness. His rebellion is not against life, but on behalf of it. He wrote, "The realization that life is absurd cannot be an end, but only a beginning. To live absurdly is to love without hope of eternity, to create beauty without the need for permanence, to find meaning in the fleeting. It is not despair that defines us. It is devotion, the devotion to continue, to push the stone, to write the poem, to live the moment fully aware that it will vanish." The absurd teaches us that truth is not a destination, but an encounter, that clarity is not given, but built, again and again. Camus once said, "In the depth of winter, I finally learned that within me there lay an invincible summer. That summer is not faith, not knowledge, not salvation. It is the quiet flame of consciousness, the light that endures in the midst of the void. And perhaps that is all we need. Not certainty, but awareness. Not eternity, but intensity. Not meaning, but the courage to live without it."